Hello, my name is Jim Heinlein. I've loved poetry since I was a young teenager in high school. I love to write poetry, read poetry, analyze poetry, and teach it. But poetry was not my career. I was a high school orchestra teacher until Meniere's disease made me retire 18 years ago. Since then, I've continued to volunteer in the Stillwater Public School System in Minnesota, teaching poetry to elementary students. Also, since retiring, I've taken up oil painting, and with my wife's encouragement, I started section hiking the Appalachian Trail. And to date, I've finished 1,400 miles out of the 2,200 miles. The Veda Poetry Contest came into being when Cynthia Ryan, the executive director of Veda, and I were sharing lunch last fall. And I just casually said, we should have a poetry contest. She thought about it, talked it over with Shannon, the Veda communications director, and here we are today, good people sharing and listening to each other to make understanding grow within our vestibular community. And we're meeting today to talk about poetry for the Poetry for Balance Veda contest. I've loved poetry since high school when a teacher taught us the T.S. Eliot poem, The Hollow Men, and I was just stunned to see that words could capture such deep emotion and feeling. Since then, I've turned into an avid poetry reader. I love to analyze it, write it, teach it. And this class came about because I was talking with Cynthia Ryan, the executive director of Veda, last fall, and mentioned maybe we should have a poetry writing contest for people who have vestibular disorders. And she and Shannon talked about it, and here it is today, the first of two lectures about poetry and how you can be in the contest, but also how you can write your story in poems. Let's talk about vestibular disorders in poetry. These are the crucial questions that I think we face, those of us who have vestibular disorders. How do we construct ourselves after the assault of vestibular disorders? How do we learn to get up after continual knockdowns? How do we search for and recover a center to our internal world? How do we not lose hope? How do we make sense of life when our sensory systems are damaged? How can we share what we experience and feel with another person? If we can't go back to how we were before, how in the world can we move forward? How can we discover both who we are at this very moment and who we might become in the future? How do we find someone we can trust to take the time to listen to us? And how do we deal with all those well-meaning people who say, just get over it? Or, you don't look like anything is wrong? How do we get over blaming ourselves? And how do we know when to seek professional help to help us make sense of our chaotic internal world? Because I can articulate these questions doesn't mean that I have the answers. But to put it a different way, because I can articulate these questions, it means that I have gone through and continue to go through all of this vestibular disorders in my brain from Meniere's disease. But let's just flat out say it. Why am I teaching this class today? It's because I think that writing can help us deal with the chaos of vestibular disorders. Perhaps not entirely with answers, but at least it can clarify where we are and where we might go. Humans are story making and story interpreting beings. Much of our meaning comes through understanding story. Stories are powerful because they are inclusive. They invite others into our shared wisdom. They create a sense of community around the experiences that we have and the perceptions of our life shared with others. In this way, poetry is a type of story, but in miniature, cut down to essence. My definition of poetry is simple: the right word in the right place. And who better to write the poetry about vestibular disorders than the people who experience it? Experience the disorders, experience the dislocation in the real world. But let's again be real. Can the act of writing give us a measure of control over our dizzy bodies, our tinnitus ears, and our painful migraines? Can reaching into ourselves, our inner lives, the flinty emotion of our beings offer directions, even a measure of healing? Maybe, maybe not. I don't want to exaggerate it and claim too much, but I think it might be possible that the act of putting pencil to paper and authoring one's existence does give clarity, direction, and the ability to share with others what it feels like inside of our brain and body. The words author one existence can seem trite, but they're not. Moral beings must be able to author the story of their own lives and use that as a guide to their goals, their choices, and their perceptions. To see ourselves sprawled, naked on a piece of paper is to gain a moment of detachment from so heavy a concentration on ourselves. Perhaps then we can gain insight, maybe even humor that allows us to keep on. Ironic, isn't it, that taking time to write about ourselves lessens the obsession with the self and allows us to view our lives from different angles and see our predicament from multiple perspectives, to glimpse what we used to be and gain a foothold into what we could yet become. This is what I believe. Answers are not as important as the act of writing itself. Mary Oliver, that wonderful American poet, said the use of literature bends not toward the narrow and the absolute, but to the extravagant and the possible. Vestibular disorders were unwelcome destinations for each of us, not just unwelcome, but unknown. Most we had never heard the names or knew anything about these diseases before they hit us, a destination we didn't choose physically, mentally, spiritually, or emotionally. They've cost us careers, relationships, family, and educational opportunities. But here we are, and we can't go back. So, how can we proceed to write poetry about our experience? The first way is to share with others how they can find us, the world we inhabit in a metaphorical way. Let me share an Anishinaabe song poem from the orator of the family of the crane from the North Woodlands of Wisconsin. Listen to this poem the first time with your imagination, perhaps with your eyes closed if you're able to, and just take in the beauty and the weight of the words. The poem is called If You Wished to Know Me. If you wished to know me, you must seek me in the clouds. I am a bird who rises from the earth and flies far up into the skies out of human sight. Though not visible to the eye, my voice is heard from afar and resounds over the earth. It's from a book by Gerald Robert Visner, published by Nodden Press in Minneapolis. Now, let me read the poem again, and this time let your mind create the implications and the associations that flood those words. If you wish to know me, where do you live? What kind of animal or bird might you choose for yourself in this metaphor? Listen to it again. If you wish to know me, you must seek me in the clouds. I am a bird who rises from the earth and flies far up into the skies, out of human sight. Though not visible to the eye, my voice is heard from afar and resounds over the earth. We know the poem is not literally true. I'm not a bird. I don't live in the clouds. My voice is not heard over the earth. But what is the truth of those words? The truth lies in metaphor. And my definition is not the academic definition that will get you through first year English in college. But how do we interpret the hidden invitation in language to understand the meaning? A metaphor has two parts, one which is literally true and one which is literally not true, but reveals a deeper truth. So in our poem, If You Wish to Know Me, that's true. You must seek me in the clouds, metaphor. I am a bird, not true, metaphorically true. Who rises from the earth, metaphor. Far up into the skies, the entire rest of the poem is literally not true. But the literally true part, those first two words, and the literally untrue part about being a word, together reveal this deeper truth of the poem. We could assign all kinds of characteristics to birdness, but the orator does it for us. He says, I exist in the clouds. I rise up from the earth. I fly far up into the sky. I'm not visible to the eye, but my voice is heard over the earth. So, the fun part of understanding metaphorical truth. Let's look at those lines and label them. The literally true, the metaphorically true. And as I said, we find out the poem is almost entirely metaphor. And those metaphors invite us, the readers, the listeners, to participate in a community that understand each other. Metaphors, that hidden invitation to understand on a level that's not literal. If the listener cannot or does not share the meaning of that metaphor, it's because it's outside their knowledge. And then no community exists. But if the metaphor strikes home and has meaning, a powerful sense of community is created. An invitation is issued, an invitation is accepted, and now the arc of the poem becomes emotionally true at our core. Take this song poem above. We know that it's not literally true, but the words, the many words that can capture this poem, say the following. It says, I'm not contained solely in the shape of my body. I do not entirely live at the address where my house is. That I'm not just confined to what can be seen, but the mystery, the feelings that are shared without words, the emotions that bubble over to others. We can also add just a little bit of the Native American knowledge of this poem. Oratory in the Native American community, according to an article in the University of Arizona Press, was more than telling a story. It's a way of establishing self-worth and was considered a supreme achievement of the orator. We might also want to know that the spirit of the crane, because this was a poem from the orator of the crane, the spirit of the crane was thought to embody the essence of earth, water, and air, because the crane is a spiritual bird that can walk, swim, and fly. However, and this is the big however of this poem, the important element that we cannot back away from. We must act in goodwill when somebody wants to know us, because it's unreasonable to think that anybody with any kind of insight can simply know where we reside, see through our defenses, our sadness, our loneliness. If you wish to know me, then I must share who I am and where I live, because I am a bird that flies up from the earth. And though I'm not visible to the eye, you can hear that I speak the truth clearly and articulately. So, for writing poetry, how do we turn our privileged knowledge of ourselves into a poem? That's the question that writers face. It's a difficult question, but it's a fun question. How can we deliberately make metaphors that capture the human heart? I'd offer the following advice as you start writing your own poems. Start by imagining, by going to images that are in your mind, and take those moments and the words that surround those moments and start writing them out. And then take those words and turn them first into similes. So similes are just metaphors, except they slip in those words like or as. So in the example from the poem, you might have started by saying, I am like a bird. And once you have that, you can let the writing draw the inferences of being bird-like. Birds live in clouds, they fly, they live out of human sight. And then write and rewrite and drop the like or as, and simply make the powerful statement, I am a bird. The power that comes from words that are straight and true to the heart, that ring with the power of our own experiences, those words that beg to capture the moment so that we can get to know another person. That's what we want to write. The Veda Poetry Contest requires that you be concise. 4 lines. 5 lines? Nope, that won't do. 4 lines. But that's difficult. So you might want to start off with more than 4 lines. Very often when we write, we're viciously attached to our first words. But sometimes, and very often, that's not our best effort. We seem to need to get going, to get into the flow, and our later lines are really our better lines. So write it out, edit it down, play with the words, move them around, try different words, cut out some, drop the seemingly ever-present I. Poems generally are better without the words I in them. Be bold, yet mysterious. Be assertive and visually rich with just a few words. Use your imagination to visualize telling someone where they could go to know you as a person with vestibular disorders. Don't say too much, but squeeze the essence out of what you do say. Speak of the spirit wounded. Don't tell us that you're on the floor throwing up. Speak of tentative wholeness, not entirely of what was lost. Write about stumbling but not giving up. Tell us about trusting the stillness in your life, not about the rock concerts you can no longer go to and stand in front of those towers of speakers. Tell us about the trust that you have now for your own emotions, your own experience. Look at your sadness straight on, but with determination to start again and yet again. Forgive yourself in words and in the act of writing, because as William Carlos Williams said, what is the power of love but forgiveness? And first of all, we need to forgive ourselves. We need to be gentle with the parts of you that are sad and that are lost, and be strong with the parts of you that have triumphed over this cluster of diseases, and write those into a poem. So take a piece of paper. I can't do it on a computer, but I can do it on a piece of paper. Write, scratch, scrawl, get some words down, and turn it into Veda. You can see at the top of this broadcast the site that you need to send, the vestibular site that you need to send the poem to. These are the rules. It can be a rhyming poem or a free verse poem that does not have any rhyme. The poem must be 4 lines long. The total word count may not exceed 70 words. 1 entry per person, and it's open to people with vestibular disorders and those who love and support them. I will select the 6 semi-finalist poems from all of the poems that are submitted. These poems will be posted on the Veda social media sites, and readers will be able to vote for their choice for the best poem. There will be 1 winner and 2 runner-ups based on the vote totals. The winners will all 3 receive valuable swag from the Veda online store. $50 for the overall winner and $25 each for the 2 runner-ups. The deadline for submission is March 31st. Good luck and send those poems in.